Will and I were in grad school together in 2012, 13, 14. While there, he convinced me to attend a 5-day meditation retreat at a temple in Kissimmee, Florida. And it was my first time doing a meditation retreat. And I was really excited to go. But when we went, they did something a little weird. They started showing us medical autopsy DVDs and slideshows of bodies in various states of decay, and asking us to meditate on the unattractiveness of the body and death. And I was pretty concerned that Will had brought me to a cult.
Welcome to Mindfulness of Doom, a weekly podcast about life, peaceful living, and existential dread. You're not lost. Everyone's faking it, and the purpose of life is, enjoy the show.
It was actually really interesting, informative, kind of in our professional and personal relationship, because we stayed up for like multiple nights debating for hours, which was fun.
Yeah, I didn't take it well.
Yeah.
It took me a while to come around to understanding that this practice is actually a modern adaptation of an ancient Buddhist practice that's taught to monks. It turns out that this is a practice that has been around since the time of the Buddha, about 2,500 years ago, and he would instruct his monks to meditate on the impermanence of life, help them get over their attachments to life and their fears of death by understanding that a corpse and you are really the same thing, that is something that you are going to be, and that there's no difference between that and you, and it's part of your future, and it's a little bit uncomfortable to deal with, but dealing with it and overcoming it can help you detach from your clinging to things that you want and desire, such as to continue living.
Yeah, and I think it's a practice that's meant to gear you towards getting more happiness in life ultimately, which is kind of the goal by letting go of those attachments to the body and whatnot, as you were saying.
So, Will, what was the history there? How did it come to be in the United States?
It started in the time of the Buddha, and actually possibly before that. And then it continued for a few hundred years, and then might have died out largely in the Buddhist world. In the United States now, in every single state, there is a Thai Theravada Buddhist Temple. And so that's what we went to in Florida. And they just happened to be doing this because the teacher of the English-speaking people used to be a cancer surgeon. So he's a medical doctor, and so he was kind of incorporating some of his medical stuff in, which... But anyways, like we said, this is an ancient Buddhist practice.
So it died out for a while, and it came back in Thailand.
Right, yeah, sorry. So in the mid 1800s, actually in Thailand, the actual practice of meditation had kind of died out, even though it was the most Buddhist country in the world. And but then there came along these...
Can one be more Buddhist than another?
I think that's a conversation for another day. But yeah, so these monks came along, namely Ajahn Mun, who started this Thai forest tradition where these monks were super hardcore, and they would live out in the jungle and wander around and practice meditation. And so they revived this practice of meditating in charnel grounds on partially burnt bodies and decomposing corpses.
A charnel ground is a funeral pyre.
Indeed.
Right?
Yeah, in Thailand, they actually have open cremations. So they'll build up some wood and actually have an open cremation out in the open. And monks will meditate on it. So after the time of Ajahn Mun, with the reformation of this Thai forest tradition and the practice of death and unattractiveness of the body meditations, there was another monk who became really famous called Ajahn Chah, who came around. And he started out as a wandering forest monk, but then he actually set up monasteries in the northeast of Thailand. And his thing was he actually started teaching Westerners. So he started teaching English-speaking people from all around the world. And so he became really well known. And his students are still around today teaching people like Ajahn Brahm and Ajahn Jayasaro and Ajahn Sumedho. So, and inside his temples, which we wrote about in our research, he actually has skeletons hanging and pictures of decomposing bodies inside his temples.
This is something that the two of you gave as a lecture to the Intro to Religion course. So just to paint the picture for a minute, there's about 20 19-year-olds sitting in a classroom, and Cory stands up with a slide projector, and some of these very graphic images are coming up on the screen, and to watch some of the reactions of the students was entertaining. And at the same time, you could get that they were able to get beyond the shock value, and they got really interested in the value of the practice.
We didn't really think anything of it. Then we went back to grad school and casually mentioned it to one of our professors later. And he's like, oh, you mean to tell me that an ancient practice has been revived, crossed the ocean, is being taught to lay people instead of monks, and they're using modern technology to do it? And we're like, yeah. He's like, that's a paper. That's a paper. You have to publish that.
Yeah, it was great to see our professor so excited about something that we told him, telling us to do the research.
It was great. Well, it caused us to have to go back to that monastery 3 or 4 more times to continue to expose ourselves to graphic images of festering corpses and medical autopsies. And
we started to like it.
I don't think I've ever been so excited in my life to watch other people be uncomfortable.
What were some of the results of the studies that you did? Because I understand that you surveyed the participants of these retreats to gauge whether the death meditation was beneficial to their practice and experience.
The results that we got were actually kind of surprising, right? Because we were kind of expecting more negative results, like people saying that it was not helpful, but actually it was kind of the opposite.
Yeah, I think so. We surveyed over the course of 2 visits. We did 2 different survey sessions, probably collecting maybe between 50 and 60 different results. And it turns out most people, they were all adults, and the age ranges were pretty varied. But a lot of people have had experience. There was a pretty broad range of experiences from, some people had no experience, some people had more than 10 years, and some people had 2, 5, or 10 years experience. And it was pretty even across the board. No, about half and half said that the death meditation ended up being relevant to their experience or their purpose in attending the retreat. Some people, about 50% said no, and about 45% said yes. But we were expecting the death meditation to hinder their personal meditation. So when we asked the question, did the death or unattractiveness meditations help or hinder your personal meditation? 20% of people said it helped, but only 5% of people said it didn't help. The vast majority, 65%, said it didn't help or hurt them.
And what you're about to hear next are some of the questions and answers that the students had for us at the end of the class. What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 4 of the Mindfulness of Doom podcast. We're actually recording live here at Valencia State University. Cory, what class are we in right now, and how did we come to be here?
I have no idea where we are and why we're here and why there's all these people looking at us. This is weird. We have a live audience.
We have a live audience, and this is the first time we've had a live audience, and you'll notice that we're using our radio voices. We sound a little bit different now than we did earlier this evening.
We're invading our host's classroom right now.
It's a welcome invasion. It's a migration.
You gotta get up here. You gotta go on. Get up here.
Get it.
Make some love to it.
You want me to get close to your ball? Put my mouth closer to your blue ball.
Put your mouth closer to my blue ball.
All right, it's closer.
If only there was video. Oh, wait, there is.
There is video.
There is video. Yeah. This is our guest today is Professor William Colachicco. Everybody give him a round of applause. And this is his Intro to Religion class. And we just stumped and shocked and terrified these poor students for the last hour and a half or so, showing them all sorts of things about doom.
Can we get another round of applause for that?
That's some shameless self-promotion pandering right there.
Look, doom is a wonderful thing when you really don't think about it.
Why is doom a wonderful thing?
Well, look, the way that I see it is we're all going to die. It's going to happen. We don't know exactly when, but keeping in mind that it is going to happen and the end is near, why not live life to the fullest while we have it?
I'm starting to panic.
Well, I invite you to feel that.
Okay.
Okay, good. Keep
panicking.
feeling that. Are you with it?
Do you want me to keep panicking?
Keep panicking.
Okay, I'm keep panicking.
Yep, just go with it.
Okay, panicking.
Feel it.
Panic mode engaged.
Get it, girl.
Okay. Now what do I do?
Breathe.
Okay. It feels a little bit better.
Keep breathing.
Okay. I'm going to keep breathing, but in the meantime, I would like Will to tell us a little bit about his class and what he's taught them so far.
So this is World Religions, and so far we've covered indigenous traditions, such as Native American religious traditions. We've also covered different types of Hinduism, Brahmanism, Shamanistic traditions of Hinduism, such as yoga and Buddhism, which is what we're on now.
How many of the students currently have an A in your class?
All of the students currently have an A.
That.
Because I'm the best professor ever.
That sounds to me like you're the worst professor ever.
Well, at least they have fun.
Okay, good. Did you guys have fun today?
I mean,
Really?
free good grades is always fun, right?
It's kind of like free money.
Yes, I would argue that free money is a little bit better. That's for the other podcast.
What I would like to do is open up for questions for anybody that's here. If you would like to ask us anything about the things that we talked about today or anything that happened in the semester up until this point, feel free to ask questions of Professor Will, Professor Brian, or Master Cory. And if you have no questions, we're just going to stare at you uncomfortably until you ask us something important.
And then we might talk about some things.
So his name is actually William too. So this is actually William, and Brian.
I didn't know that until I saw it on the PowerPoint slide. And then I started wondering whether it was a typo and you just copy-pasted one line into the other line and then forgot to delete the first name.
We didn't tell you yet, but we're actually starting a law firm as well. So we're going to be William, and Brian.
I'm in.
I like that. WWB.
Does that station still exist? Didn't that used to be a TV station?
I think you're talking about the WB.
Oh, but it's like their jingle was like WWB.
I'm so glad I have that recorded of you. So if anybody wants to just raise your hand at any point, we'll pass this around or bring it to you.
Or you could come to the ball.
Yeah, you could come up here.
This is a college course, William.
Okay. So what I wanted to ask you about, since we have a special guest, is, Will, what are your thoughts on doom?
I think that you create your own doom. Just like how, every generation, every couple of years, people think that the world's going to end, and it never does. But in a way, their world ends, which is the world that they've created.
So you're thinking of doom in like the personal, your sense of the term, of like every day you could be engaging with it or not engaging with it. You're not actually talking about like the end of the world.
No, I am not talking about the end of the world.
Okay, because
which to me is pretty irrelevant since we're not going to experience it. Probably.
Yeah, probably not. Brian, do you think the world's going to end with a bang or a whimper?
Oh, it's definitely going out with a whimper. Look, the romantic visions of fire and brimstone and meteors and volcanoes and atomic bombs and all of that, it sounds lovely to me. And if that happened, there would be panic and terror and all of these emotions flying high, and we would probably be looting and rioting in the streets. And I really don't see that as a viable reality. It seems more likely that humanity is just going to peter off the edge of existence and one day fizzle out with a...
You know, my favorite bumper sticker I saw in the past couple of years was you'd have the Bernie Sanders bumper stickers, you'd have the Hillary Clinton bumper stickers, you'd have the Trump bumper stickers, and then you'd have that one that's like, it says giant meteor, just end it all already. So let's poll the audience by a round of applause. Do you think the universe or the world is going to end with a bang? Okay, and do you think the world is going to end with a whimper? You all just missed an opportunity to whimper and cower in fear. What's up?
What do you mean when you say end with a bang?
This is the phenomenon whereby the planet explodes into several pieces and shards, and then there's blood and guts and body parts everywhere, and it's all over the news, although that wouldn't be possible because the world no longer exists in one piece. That would be ending with a bang.
For example, if Rocket Man shot off all his rockets.
What are your thoughts, like, when you say end with a bang, like how the universe was, or our solar system was created with the Big Bang Theory? Is that what, like, you kind of get to, or you just mean, like, Earth in itself?
There is a counter theory that, yes, the universe started with something called a Big Bang, which was probably more of a gentle expansion. And it could be that we're expanding and expanding, expanding, and then as the breath inhales, eventually it exhales, the universe may reverse its expansion and begin to contract upon itself until eventually it crunches back into one big, dense energy mass. And it could be a loud crunch, or it could be a gentle
Or it could rebang.
It could rebang. We could be in this trillion, multi-trillion year process of expanding and contracting over and over again. And
We just keep banging.
So there's this. The question is about, what will the world end with a bang or a whimper? And it's kind of a philosophical discussion amongst some doom and gloomists about, our society is 10,000 years old. We've been doing agriculture for a long time, and we've built up a system that has sustained itself for so long that we've kind of forgotten that it operates at all, and we take it for granted.
And it's this tiny little blip of existence along the entire timeline of everything that has ever existed.
Right. And we know that things can't last forever, but with the upcoming century, it seems that we have a bottleneck of sorts, where the term the Anthropocene, which is the geological term used to describe a period of Earth's geology that can be measured because of human interaction. So, the 50 million years, billion years of time that has existed on the planet, you can start to measure the time, studying rocks and whatever. But we've gotten to the point now where human interaction can be measured. Even if our species stopped existing in the next 100 years or so, a million years or 50 million years from now, most of the signs of our civilization will be gone. All of our buildings and structures will be buried and covered under rocks, and they'd be just kind of torn apart, turned back into, just rocks or whatever. Over a long period of time, we wouldn't even be able to be noticed if some other species came to the planet to check on us. But now, we've added so much carbon to the atmosphere and added so many other things that are permanent, that it's measurable, and that if we can't get through this next 150 years of solving our population crisis, solving our food epidemics, and making sure we're taking care of the environment, making sure global warming doesn't ruin our own environment. So there's a lot of issues, a lot of problems that we have to face in the next coming 150 years, and we might make it. We might not. We might blow each other up in a nuclear holocaust style, and that would be going out with a bang. And we might just slowly
Dry up and starve.
Yeah, that could happen too. Not to make anybody anxious about those things.
No, and if you think about it in the grand scale of all time, it's very insignificant. I mean, these 10,000 years have been very long, and at the same time, they've been very, very short. And so that brings me to the question, Cory. I mean, what's the point of it all? If you had to choose between life right now and experiencing what you have to experience, or just, like, let's just go for the whole death thing and end it already, because what's the point? What would you choose?
I mean, the point of living is to live, and I rather enjoy doing that right now. So I'm going to keep doing that.
Now that we've discussed how the world may end, in Zen Buddhism, how do you guys view the creation of the world?
The answer is it doesn't matter.
Well, in the Buddhist cosmological sense of the term, Will is actually right. It doesn't matter to them. They do have a belief structure about how the world was created, but most of it is actually incorporated from previous religions. Buddhism didn't occur in a vacuum. They used the worldviews around them to help bolster their own opinions. And then when they moved on, when it got successful and they moved into other regions, they would incorporate the gods and deities of those other regions. And so they would incorporate their myths and just say, oh, yeah, you can have your gods, but they're actually part of the Buddhist canon now. So in that way, instead of telling people, no, you can't have your religion, you have to be Buddhist now, they would say, oh, no, you can have your religion, and you're Buddhist, which is why part of the reason why Buddhism tended to be so successful. The Indian worldview that they used, that they incorporated into Buddhism, is this idea that the world exists on the back of a giant turtle. All of it. The whole world.
But then you might ask, what is the turtle resting on top of?
Another turtle.
Well, then what is that turtle resting on top of?
Hey, buddy, it's turtles all the way down.
So you're saying it's a menage a turtle?
Yeah, it's like the Infinity Ninja Turtle.
That is awesome.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh, my goodness.
Right? Buddhism believes in infinite Ninja Turtles.
And that's what got you into martial arts.
And you heard it here first.
Wow.
So the world was born from Ninja Turtles.
Yes. And
We solved it.
They're all male turtles too. So if we think about
Jurassic Park, life finds a way.
You said earlier that happiness is a choice. Can you elaborate more on it?
You guys want to elaborate on happiness as a choice?
I'll take happiness.
Yeah.
No, really, I'll take happiness. That's how it works. It's illusory. Have you ever heard somebody say, or perhaps you've said it yourself, I can't help how I feel. It's just how I feel. And then what happens? We take action from that place of feeling however we feel, and then our actions end up affecting ourselves and other people. And because we declare that we cannot help how we feel, we defer the responsibility of having our feelings to, well, nobody. Nobody can be responsible for how we feel, which is actually a falsehood. We know from experience, if you really go into it, you can alter your mood at any time simply by thinking certain thoughts, can you not? You can. So, what's your name? Kaylin. Kaylin, can we pass the mic back over to Kaylin? Sure. Awesome. Thank you. Here you go. Kaylin, what's a thought that you could have right now that makes you extremely happy?
Going to sleep?
Going to sleep would make you incredibly happy right now.
Yes.
Awesome.
Not because I'm bored, but I'm tired.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, you're here at almost 9 o'clock at night, or it's 8 o'clock, rather. It's 8 o'clock at night. You've been in a college classroom for over 2 hours already, and I imagine you must be quite tired. So given that context, you could create a thought in your mind about going to sleep. And is there a feeling in your body associated with that thought?
What do you mean?
How do you feel thinking about the possibility of going to sleep?
Happy.
You feel happy. Perfect. So you've just created the experience of happiness using a single thought. And if you pay attention to your body, there's a feeling that takes place. You might feel it somewhere in your chest. It's like a warm, fuzzy feeling. And it feels a little bit expansive. And your face, your cheeks might warm up. And I notice that you're smiling right now. Do you feel that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that as human beings, we have this uncanny ability to use our thoughts to shift our mood And if we make it a habit of using our thoughts to shift our mood, that mood then becomes habitual.
I would agree with that. I think that you can actually make your experience more enjoyable simply by recognizing what you're paying attention to. If you attach your happiness based on getting what you want, you're only going to be happy when you get what you want. But you're going to realize soon enough that getting what you want is not within your control. And when you let go of that needing to control that thing that you want and just choosing to be engaged in the life that you have, even if you're not getting what you want, you can find something fulfilling by just being where you are. Being tired is natural. It's totally normal. Enjoy it. It's a choice. It's not pleasant. It's not super comfortable, but you can still choose to enjoy that emotion, because that feeling of being tired is something that only people who are alive get to have. The dead don't get to have pain. They don't get to be tired. You just remind yourself, hey, I'm tired. Great, I'm alive. That's awesome. that can help a lot. And just having that right kind of mentality often can just be the huge difference that you need in the day. It's just, fake it till you make it, have a positive attitude. Those things are real. Those have real measurable effects. And you can make your day better just by choosing to. You can't really control your thoughts, and you can't control what other people do to you, and you can't really control your feelings, but you can control how you react to those feelings.
And if I may add to that, oftentimes when people are looking for happiness, they're looking outside of themselves to something else, to some stimulus that's going to give them pleasure. And we often make the mistake that when searching for happiness, not only do we not realize that it's already within us, we also don't realize that what we're really seeking in life is our own fulfillment. And the mistake between happiness and fulfillment is a huge one, because you won't always experience happiness in your day-to-day experience. But being present in your experience will bring you fulfillment. The appreciation, the gratitude for being alive is what ultimately brings us that happiness.
Since you guys are teaching impermanence and you guys are aware, how do you guys deal with death and negative news?
That's kind of a complicated question, because if you're talking about news, then you could get into all the stuff about how the news is manipulated, and they actually intentionally make it negative because that's what triggers our emotions most instantaneously. Evolutionarily, we're trained to react that way to dangerous and negative stuff that's to do with negative stuff like that. So that's why that happens. And since I've understood that and studied psychology, I just know that, and that's why I don't watch the news.
I would say that, with the metaphor of being in the river, you have some ability to swim. You have some control, but most of the control you have is up to the whims of the river. That's life. Sometimes you get bashed against the rocks. So when you encounter those things, when you have a death in the family, or you have something really hard and difficult that you're going through, that's life happening at that moment. And you need to remember that nothing is permanent. And that when you do have those negative times, realize, this is just one of those times, and it will pass. Take comfort in the fact that you can't feel bad all the time. You have to have some good feelings to be able to understand what the bad feelings are. And so when you're having a bad time, a lot of times we look at the clock and go, oh man, I want this to go away, I want this to go away. Or when we have a good time, we look at the clock and go, oh God, I want this to stay forever, I want this to stay forever. Impermanence teaches us that those two feelings are really the same thing. You're clinging. You're pulling something toward you that you want, or pushing something away from you that you don't want. But that desire is inherently the same thing. try to let go a little bit. Try to relax. Try to tell yourself it's not going to last forever. And if that isn't enough solace, I would encourage you to do what Brian suggested. Engage with it. Don't run from it. Because the only way out for a lot of things is to go through. And sometimes you can spend your whole life running. You can spend your whole life trying to avoid distractions, avoiding bad news, avoiding things that you don't want to come to terms with. But those distractions are endless. They will follow you everywhere. My favorite Avett Brothers song says something to the extent of, when you run, make sure you run to and not from, because lies don't need an airplane to chase you anywhere. These bad things are going to happen. And when they happen, let them happen. And then they'll be over. But if you try to push them away, it will take them longer to leave you.
What do you think of people who basically say that they had near-death experiences? What do you think of those people who keep saying that?
Near-death experiences. This is one of my favorite topics. Yeah, about 2 years ago, and this is also on the subject of PTSD, and I'd be willing to speak with you more about that as well. 2 years ago, I was struck by a vehicle while I was riding my bicycle home, and I don't remember what happened. I woke up in the hospital at about 3 a.m. My wife was next to me, and I said, "Oh my God, Naomi, you're here." And she goes, "Yes, Brian, that's about the 80th time you've said that." It turned out I had suffered a brain injury, and for about 2 to 3 months, I had short-term memory loss. Now, many people ask me, what was it like to have short-term memory loss? And I tell them I don't remember. But that aside, because of the brain injury, I was experiencing some abnormalities in how I interacted with reality. One of them had to do with overactive stimuli. I would become easily overwhelmed if I had too much visual stimulus in my surroundings or too much audible stimulus in my surroundings. So, for example, if I would go to the Container Store and you would see all the ticky, all the little items of the same color, different colors, all the same size over and over again, it would be incredibly overwhelming. Multiply that by 100. 2 months after the injury, I went to a New York nightclub. Terrible idea. And the DJ dropped the bass, and the lights started flashing, and the sound got really loud. Boom, 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 boom. New Jersey was fist pumping in there. And suddenly, I began to see sound. And sound looks like, if you've ever driven at night and you see the lights and they have these like halo effects around them, sound kind of looks like that. And it comes from the source that it's coming from. And then, as I sat, suddenly I began to see or experience things that were in this reality that I was not able to see or experience before. My perception broadened, so to speak, and I began to panic.
Is this on a cognitive level that you're seeing, that you're engaging with these things? Are you thinking about these things, or were you able to create thoughts about this?
For a good period of 2 to 3 months while I was dealing with short-term memory loss, I wasn't able to create many thoughts. But there were some experiences that I would find to be overwhelming, and then I would begin to have automatic thoughts. Something happens when you have PTSD where your thoughts and your bodies react without your conscious control. There's really nothing that you can do. It's like you just get taken over by a rushing river of emotion. And it takes practice and it takes work to get through that. In this experience, I began to get overwhelmed by all the visual and audio stimuli. And in a panic, I got up and I said, I have to get out of here. And I ran toward what I thought was an exit. And I didn't see a rope because the rope had blended. It had phased out of reality and other things started to phase in of reality. And I heard a voice that sounded like it was above water that said, hey, you can't go that way. And then I felt my arm being grabbed. And then I looked, there was no hand there grabbing my arm. And then I felt my physical body get thrown up against a wall. And then I watched my physical body get thrown up against the wall from right about over here, maybe 4 or 5 feet away. And I think my physical body pushed the bouncer. I think it was a bouncer.
That doesn't sound like an intelligent idea.
Never pushed the bouncer. And then I heard my wife's voice in the distance say, "Leave him alone, he has a brain injury, he doesn't know what's going on." And then I managed to break free of the invisible grip on my arm, and I made my way towards some stairs, or what I thought were some stairs. But I was a little bit behind myself as I was moving down the stairs. And then I found what I thought was light, and I pushed through it, and there were doors, I think. And then I found myself in New York. I had my eyes closed through most of this. I was able to see and perceive without using my visual capabilities. So there was something else at play here, and I noticed that my experience was that I was not in my physical body. And while I was...
Your near-death experience ended up following you for months after you had actually been injured.
Yeah. So this was something that didn't happen just once. Anytime I would accidentally find myself in a place that had too much stuff going on, and perhaps you've been in this situation where you were not expecting there to be a DJ on that street corner, or you were not expecting an ambulance to go by, or you were not expecting that person over there to lay on their horn for several minutes because they were impatient in traffic. And suddenly I would find myself being shaken from my body. And you could call that a near-death experience because there were times when my experiential self, we'll call it a spirit body for lack of a better term, would be experiencing more than just the physical stuff that we're used to perceiving with our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and skin. While that would happen, there was an experience, there was like a set of stages that would take place and a set of feelings that would come along with that. And through those experiences, I learned 2 very important life distinctions. One is the distinction of attachment. With attachment, we hold on to the stories and the ideas and the meaning in life and the physical objects, and we hold it so dear that we're not willing to let go. And so it keeps us here. And for those of us who pass on, this could be a belief, but in my experience, for those of us that pass on and leave the physical body, we can get stuck and not move past a certain point. Surrender, the opposite of attachment, is a phenomenon by which we let go of everything. All stories, all meaning. We become nothing. We become our true self. And in that experience, we can continue on. We can exit the body. We can leave. And we can use attachment to come back to the body. And maybe you can elaborate on this, there is a tradition of out-of-body meditations, and they were mentioned in your lecture earlier on, I believe.
Yeah, out-of-body meditations are a real thing. It depends on the culture in which you're talking about. For example, Theravada Buddhism has a more structured, systematized pattern of like you start with this meditation, you move to this one, you move to this one. And there's something called the jhana meditations, which are intense concentration meditations, which are supposed to lead you to the out-of-body experiences. But one thing I would like to mention, since we are coming to the end of our time, and I want to thank everybody here for paying attention and being with us and being present and sharing these stories and experiences with us. We're very grateful to have you, and I hope that this was formative for you. But I would like to leave you with a little bit of a story about stories. Every good story is like a tree nut. Only a fool swallows it whole. The wise know that you have to crack the nut first, discard the bitter outer shell, and eat the meat inside. The things that we talked about today, the stories that you hear, the research and all of the craziness and the crazy Zen master stuff and the death meditation, all of it. There is something to be learned in each of those things, but what that is up to you. But don't swallow the story whole. You don't need all of it. Take the parts you need and move on. But if you take everything you hear completely and swallow it all, you're just going to end up digesting a bitter shell, and it isn't really going to help you. I'd like to thank everybody for coming, and thank you for enjoying and being a part of our podcast, Mindfulness of Doom, Episode 4. Yay!
This podcast sponsored by Cory's Blue Ball.
Cory's blue ball right up in front of my face this whole time.
This podcast also brought to you by Swallowing Tree Nuts Whole.
Swallowing tree nuts whole. You don't get the meat, and they don't really digest. They just come out the other way whole.
This podcast also brought to you by Near-Death Experiences. Near-death experiences happening to some people, not sounding real when they tell the story, and most people not really believing them.
This podcast is brought to you by Infinite Ninja Turtles. The world is on the back of a giant Ninja Turtle, and that's on the back of another giant Ninja Turtle. And hey, buddy, it's turtles all the way down.
We invite you to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever. Have suggestions, music, or artwork for the show? Want to sponsor our podcast? Find our contact page and links to the items we talked about in this episode at www.mindfulnessofdoom.com. Become a supporter of our podcast at patreon.com/mindfulnessofdoom and get access to exclusive content that's not on the show.
This podcast is recorded in Miami, Florida. It is written, recorded, and edited by Brian Lemmerman and Corey Hardacre. Our music is provided by Pallet Town and Suitcase Music. They can be found at soundcloud.com/pallettown and at suitcasemusic.bandcamp.com. All poorly thought out opinions are ours. Nothing you hear in this podcast should be construed as professional medical advice. Go see a therapist, all of you.
Self-discovery has no end, so you can pick any place to begin. The path of self-discovery has no end, so you can pick any place to begin. Why not right here or right now? Why not the right here or right now? Or why not right here, right now? Cause now's the time and here's the place. Yes, now's the time. Yes, waking up and you can hear the sound. Yes. If you listen closely, yes, the silence has its own sound. If you listen closely, yes, the silence has its own sound.
We have a guest on the show today, Professor William Colachicco.
Doom and death.
That's right, doom and death. That's all we're about here.